I'm Larry Hancock.
And I'm Michael Cherkas. And together, we're the creators of The Silent Invasion.
And you're listening to the True North Country Comics Podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics Podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. On this episode, I chat with Larry Hancock and Michael Cherkas, creators of The Silent Invasion and more, as they prepare for tabling at Toronto Comic Con 2024. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. Toronto Comic Con is a spectacular 3-day sci-fi, horror, anime, gaming, and comic books event in Canada that attracts thousands of people to come to the Metro Toronto Convention Centre. Larry Hancock hails from Toronto, Ontario, where he graduated from the University of Waterloo with a Bachelor of Mathematics, and since then has toiled in Toronto as a chartered accountant. However, counter to the view of accountants being boring, he's written The Silent Invasion and The Purple Ray with Michael Cherkas, and Suburban Nightmares with Michael Cherkas and John Van Bruggen. He enjoys reading mysteries, science fiction, and comic books, as if you could not guess. While still an avid fan of science fiction, in recent years Larry's reading has turned much more to British crime novels. Ukrainian-Canadian author Michael Cherkas was born in Oshawa, Ontario. He's enjoyed working for over 30 years as a graphic designer, art director, cartoonist, and illustrator. He still enjoys using non-repro blue pencils, brush, India ink, and paper when making comics. His comics include The Silent Invasion with Larry Hancock, Suburban Nightmares with Larry Hancock and John Van Bruggen, The Purple Ray with Larry Hancock, and The New Frontier with John Sablick. His latest graphic novel is Red Harvest from NBM Publishing. So without further ado, here's my chat with Larry Hancock and Michael Cherkas, creators of The Silent Invasion and more, as they prepare for tabling at Toronto Comic Con. So Larry Hancock and Michael Cherkas, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Hi, good
Thanks
evening.
for having us.
Appreciate your time. Before I get going with all the questions, I would like to know, what are you reading today? What's on your bedside reading table? And Larry, maybe I could ask you to go first.
Truthfully, on my bedside reading table is mostly British crime novels or older science fiction that I might be rereading. But currently, I am reading The Road to Roswell by Connie Willis. Connie's a very popular science fiction author who writes mostly humorous novels. And I'm keen to get into this one. I'm only about 10 pages in right at the moment.
Very good. How about you, Michael? What have you got on the go?
I just finished Ukraine, The Forging of a Nation by Yaroslav Hrytsak, which I devoured in about 5 days. It's an overview of Ukrainian history within the global context. And I just started a book called Orbital by Samantha Harvey, which is a short novel about, and it's basically 24 hours on the space station.
Very good. Very good. Well, we're here talking today because you're both going to be tabling at Toronto Comic Con. So with that in mind, I wanted to ask you both, what is it like about conventions that makes you come back? What is that one thing that appeals you the most? And maybe I'll ask Michael if you could go first this time.
Boy, that's a bad choice. I think Larry's the one that keeps me coming back to conventions. Is it the costumes? It's the costumed girls that keep me coming back.
All right, the variety of cosplay. How about that? How about you, Larry?
That's what keeps me coming back.
Okay,
that's a facetious answer.
No, it's not, because the more often you go, the more outrageous the costumes get.
Well, that is true. I go because I like the interaction with the fans. Once upon a time, it was because I liked having a table, a base where I could go browse the convention and make purchases. But I'm not buying so much these days. Having gotten a bit older, I'm more or less reducing the everything around my apartment rather than increasing it, except for omnibus volumes. But I go to the convention because I like to interact with the people who come to the table, and I like to try to lure them to the table and convince them to look at our books and then sell them our books.
Well, that's a good reason for sure. Do you have any past convention or festival experiences that stand out, like maybe meeting someone you really admired? Larry, I'll ask you to go first.
It's interesting. When we first started going to conventions, when we first published The Silent Invasion back in 1986 and so, at least I was going regularly to the San Diego Comic Con every year. And it was nice being a creator because it gave you that in to mix with the other creators. And so there were lots of people whose work I admired. And I became friends with people like Len Wein and Mark Wolfman. And just the idea of being able to meet with these people who I wouldn't go so far as to say idolized, but I admired their work, and it was nice to be able to interact with them. And it often led to just peculiar situations. We got invited to dinner one year at San Diego. I think it was Strawberry Jam Comics invited a whole bunch of people to dinner. And we never ended up sitting beside the people we wanted to that we were invited to be with. Instead, we sat with Reed Waller and Kate Worley, who were Omaha the Cat Dancer creators.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
And you just never know who you're going to end up sitting beside.
That's true.
Another small thing is, to my regret, to some extent, we went to one Detroit Motor City Con years ago, and Harlan Ellison was there. He was always too busy, and I never got to walk up and say hi to him. So I never met Harlan in person, but I talked to him several times on the phones over the years before that.
Right. Wow, that's all cool stuff. How about you, Mike? Any favorite experiences from the past?
How about the first Cosmic-Con I went to as a fan, where I think, and Larry might remember this, I don't know if he was there, but I got to drink with Steve Skates and play primitive video games.
Oh, yeah.
And I met a letterer from DC Comics, whose name I don't remember, but we got along really fine because he found out I was lettering for Orb magazine at the time. If you remember Orb, the short-lived Canadian comic book of the mid-70s.
That's cool. Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, want to ask you then, what's going to be on your table as people come perusing and walking by? What are you going to be showcasing at the convention?
We're going to have a new reprint edition of Suburban Nightmares, reprinting a few short stories from the golden age of the black and white indie boom of the mid 80s. And we will also we'll have Red Harvest, and we'll have our regular old Silent Invasions there. But we do have one new book out. Or actually, this will be two new books at this year's table in a way, because neither Red Harvest nor the Suburban Nightmares have been at previous conventions.
So that's exciting stuff to check out. Now, you're always got Silent Invasion on the go. But I'm wondering what other projects that you're allowed to talk about. Is there anything upcoming that we should expect?
At the moment, in my alter ego as a professional accountant, I'm very busy with other work. So most of what we're developing right now is on Michael. So a number of years ago, Michael and I did a single issue comic book called Union City Comics and Stories, featuring the Purple Ray. And it's always been our objective to expand that into at least a 5-story.
6-issue miniseries.
6 now, okay. And so Michael is currently looking at reworking the first issue and starting to draw the second issue, which we did write a few years back. And once Michael's got to that level, I'll join in with him, and we'll finish off the Purple Ray. Michael, what was your expectation by the end of calendar year 2023?
Well, in my perfect world, I'd like to have 3 floppy comics out by the end of the year, but I think it's probably going to be 2. And once we have 3 or 4 floppy comics out, then I'm hoping that we will be able to finish it and turn it into a graphic novel by, oh my God, next year's 2025. By the end of 2025. So.
And could you just refresh my memory about what the high-level summary of the story is about?
It's basically set in an alternate world, like all comic books are. except this one is a world that had never had any superheroes except for one called the Purple Ray, who got his powers from some kind of space alien, and they are his powers are vaguely related to Nikola Tesla's purple death ray that he apparently invented in the late 19 teens, late in the second century of the second decade of the 20th century. It was a secret weapon, apparently.
Okay.
It's part of the myth behind it, and essentially what happens in the Purple Ray is he loses his powers, but before he lost his powers, he sold the rights to his life to a comic book company, and basically it was his entire rights. He had no movie rights, he had no novelization rights, no TV rights, no comic book. Like all he could collect is royalties. He had no control over it. Larry, go from there.
Well, the story takes place modern day. He originally had his powers a few decades ago, and he no longer has those abilities. So as our story opens in the first issue, he's sitting at a comic convention, very much like Toronto Comic Con coming up. And he's there to sign autographs, but he's being ignored. But instead, all the attention is being given to the actors who appeared in the TV show adaptation and the voice actors who were in the animation. And he's largely ignored. At the end of that first issue, surprise, surprise, the publisher announces a big movie, of which, of course, he's not going to be able to get any royalties or any money from. And so the story develops over the next several issues, if you will, of him bemoaning his plight of the comic company.
I'm going to interrupt here a bit too, because in a way, it's sort of it's an analogy to the comic book artists and writers, comic book creators regaining the rights to their story. So it's because further on, there's an issue where he actually goes to the comic book company and he sits there for all day and a second day and a third day, and no one will see him. And eventually, he walks in and he barges into this bullpen where there's artists working there, and the artist just looks at him and says, "I'm just the artist answering the phone. I can't help you." And it's sort of a it's tongue in cheek, but we want to tell sort of it's a history of comics in a way without actually dealing with comics.
Right. Well, it does it at multi levels, because several times we're going to tell the origin of the Purple Ray. And each time that origin changes, similar to, classic is Superman. Superman is the only Kryptonian. Then along came Supergirl. Then along came other characters.
And a dog included, even a dog.
Everything changes based on the media and everything. And so we have the development of the characters past through different filters.
I think what's going to happen by the time we get to the last issue, Larry, is the origin story. This is the other thing, that the origin story starts out as a 2 or 3 pager in the first issue, and it repeats every issue, right, in the 6-issue series. So the first issue, it's 3 pages. The next one, it's 4. But I think by the last issue, the origin story will be the entire story.
Yep.
Wow. Something to look forward to. That's for sure. So sounds intriguing. Good
all
stuff.
In development.
That's right. Well, Michael, I want to ask you, I know that we had a chance to chat about Red Harvest and your artwork style on that, but I'm wondering, what is your go-to tool these days for creating art?
Right now, because I'm just working on the pencils, it's a blue pencil, and finishing the art I'm going back to a number 5 Winsor Newton watercolor brush with lots of black ink. So I'm leaving the ballpoint pens and scratchy look behind.
Okay, good stuff. Well, you're both professionals in the comic book field, and with that in mind, I wanted to ask you, when someone comes up to your table, and no doubt they will, and they're going to ask you for advice, they want to make their first comic book, what would you say to them? Larry, I'll ask you, for what advice would you provide?
Oh my God, I'm much too practical a person. My advice to them is to study hard at other things as well. Always
you sound like somebody's parents.
Honestly, when it comes to being able to write, you first of all have to be able to read and absorb what other people are writing and understand the structure and why things are placed where they are. You have to understand story structure in order to be able to write a good story.
That's true. Good stuff. How about you, Mike? What would you say to someone?
Well, it depends what kind of comics they really want to do. If they want to get into traditional Marvel and DC, I say go ask someone else because I'm not going to give them any good advice. But if they want to do personal comics, I just say you got to write and draw from your heart, and that's it. Because I've a few times in the past I've done kind of like workshop classes with grade 8 kids. And a lot of the kids can't really draw, right? But I just say, just immerse yourself, find a story that you want to tell. It doesn't have to be very long, and you can draw it with stick figures. It doesn't have to be anatomically correct. I don't really care. And when you give people that instruction, like especially say grade 8 kids, they go away and they come back with amazing stories, like And they don't want to do any. In fact, one of the teacher told me one time. He said, the kids just want to draw the comic right now. They don't want to do any of the other work that they're required to do in class, right? So I think you just have to.
All right, good advice. That's for sure. Now, with all the different projects you have on the go and different activities, wondering where you recommend people go online to find out about your current and your future projects?
Well, for us, if they go to Facebook and they just simply do a search on The Silent Invasion, which is the name of our main series. So if they look for The Silent Invasion, our page will pop up for them.
And I'm on Instagram as Silent Invasion Comics.
Very good.
Is that right, Larry?
Actually, I'm not sure, Michael. I've never looked at your Instagram.
You're not on Instagram because I usually post stuff. I'm just going to look to see what I'm called. I think I'm Silent Invasion Comics. Yeah, Silent Invasion Comics. That's what I'm called on Instagram. And I usually post there once a week in terms of what's happening.
Good stuff. Well, Larry and Michael, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering, is there something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview?
Truthfully, for me, it's more just a case of we're very pleased when we have people come up to us at these conventions and want to talk to us, whether it be about our work or about comic books in general. And as you were talking about, younger people, and especially who come up and watches Michael's sketches, and they start to ask some questions. And Michael's very receptive to giving answers to people and giving them advice that he's able to.
Larry, thank you. I didn't know I did that.
And me, I just want to sell them books. Honestly, I go to these conventions and everybody around me must be getting tired of my patter because I keep asking people, you want a bookmark, you want a free bookmark, you got to lure them to the table, and people must be going nuts around me. But you know what? It lets me talk to people, and that's the enjoyment of these conventions, is interacting with the general people and particularly with the fans.
And remember, Larry, I have to listen to that too.
Oh, I know. I've seen those earplugs.
Thanks to Larry and Michael for the chat. You can discover more about Larry Hancock and Michael Cherkas on Facebook at facebook.com/the_silent_invasion. You can also follow Michael Cherkas on Instagram at Silent Invasion Comics. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And remember to check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website. True North Country Comics is on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel and hit the notification button. Remember, you can follow along at True North Country Comics on most social media sites. And if you have a question, concern, or just want to ask about anything, you can always reach me at john@TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2024.